Our humming began at a cold, even pace, when beats were slow and lulling. A man purred a dark melody, then repeated it. It wasn't a groan from pain and desolation, but deliberate lines of constructed meter and time that jarred our spirits and invited our participation. One by one, we joined in, some in upper registers, some in the depths of our voices, having found a language that needed no words. We hummed until we knew we'd survive. We hummed until we released mothers and fathers who we'd never see again. We hummed until our love for and gratitude to each other was clear. We hummed a celebration for living, for fighting, for refusing to die, for enduring when giving up would have been easier, for still believing against all odds that we'd get home someday. We hummed our commitment to raise children wherever we went in the way of our people. We hummed that our women slightly above might know we hadn't forgotten them. We hummed for the dead lying next to us. We hummed for children not yet born. We hummed for children born but left behind. We hummed for kinsmen, yesterday's enemies, who are now precious, coveted friends. Sometimes we hummed to mute the screeching and the pleading of our young women. They were girls, some of them barely 13 or 14 reigns, screaming from their very souls. The echo never settled. It rang throughout the hall, disrupting our sleep. Our only defense was to hum. So we hummed that they might know we were there, that they might be reminded that captors could mar their bodies, but not their spirits, that they might know his forced entry did not disturb their beauty, that they might know that one day would come when we would loose our chains and stand guard over their virtue. But until then, we believed that as long as we hum, the timbre of our voices would keep them. Occasionally, young men too were thus violated. They fought like cornered lions. It always took 3 or 4 crewmen to subdue them, one of our boys. And then with his strength exhausted and pride wounded, he was dragged up the wooden stairs to the place of defilement. We heard his screaming each step of the way. It was a hollow kind of roar, housed in a deep, innocent place. We saw in our minds his mouth stretched wide and eyes bulging. When he returned, his face was a blank stare. They threw him like a corpse into his holding place and once again bound him with chains. We begged him not to surrender, but our words, we feared, were useless babbling. So we hummed some more until slowly, painfully, he cried and joined the chorus of protection for himself or another who screamed, wept, moaned, fought, and was still overcome in battle. Then we sighed. The evening and the morning were the 15th day. Sometimes they bled profusely. It was a peculiar odor, the smell of sexual violation, a mixture of rotting flesh and underarm stench. They shivered, even though the heat below decks would have suffocated the weak. Our desecrated brothers survived because, as best we could, we reminded them of who they were. Still, most were never the same again. Some never spoke another word. Some never married. Some couldn't look at a woman again, even their own mothers and sisters. Some wanted to touch and hold lovers, but their arms could not embrace. Some conceived thoughts so vile and heinous to repeat. Most considered their own destruction. One tender brother, smothered with the captor's stench, dashed his head against his plank until we were sure his brains would spill onto the floor. An older man turned and whispered something in his ear. restoring his life. The young man did not understand his elder's words, but he heard his heart, and he survived. Most were not so fortunate. We needed our gatekeepers, those who traversed the boundaries of sexuality and spirit, those whose hearts and bodies knew no limitations. They could have told us how to heal rape from within. They would have reassured us that unless a body invites another's entry, the memory cannot linger. Yes, the sting would never be forgotten, but it need not govern one's consciousness. Simply from their touch, we could have been reminded that to expunge a person from our spirit is to erase them from our hearts. We've been taught this. Yet, in the midst of our trauma, remembering is difficult. Our gatekeepers stood at the edge of our village, watching and studying the world, prepared to protect us from any potential invasion. They had more eyes than the rest of us. They knew freedoms in ways we did not. They loved each other, men or women, without public ridicule. They were free to express themselves without boundaries or restrictions. We loved them. In their presence, we prospered. Yet without them, unable to see our future, we took refuge in memory.